Morning, everybody. Gonna wait a sec to make sure we're totally prepped and set up. We're a little short-handed today. Pastor Rich is gonna be here next week. That's exciting. Gonna make sure we're all set up on the slides. No, you're good. There we go. So, we're finally here. Gideon, with God on his side, he's got his 300 Israelites that are banded together, ready to attack this 135,000 strong army of Midianites. And, when we started out, he was this cowardly thresher, this unsure, timid, sign-requesting man who just couldn't seem to get moving. And now he's just totally on board for God. And we're going to see what happens when we get to this point, how God can use us to do such amazing and great things. So now the mystery is, how does this happen? We have 135,000. How do we do this? When we hear the story of Gideon's 300, we think about maybe like Leonidas and his 300. It's in history, the Spartan army was being invaded by the Persians, and it's very famous. Hollywood made a movie about it called 300. And these 300 soldiers were blocking this pass for Persia, and it said that there's 1 million Persians there, and they stopped them for so long, eventually losing their lives, but they halted the progress of the Persians so that their army could be routed and come back up. Hollywood likes to, fluff things up a bit. They had more like, 700, 2,000 more people that were kind of helping them out. And on top of that, it wasn't 1 million Persians. They think it was more like 130,000, 300,000. And the difference between Spartans and their 300 and Gideon and his, well, first off, the Spartans were purely a human effort at trying to tackle that many people, and they lost their lives for it. They accomplished a goal, and that's great, but God wasn't with them. Here, God is with his people. Now, this isn't the Israelite show, this is God's show, and he's about to see why. He's about to show why he should be worshipped and why there should be no other gods before him. So, in chapter 7, verse 13 and 14, we left off. Gideon just got this message from this enemy who was telling his dream to his friend. God had it set that when Gideon showed up right at the right moment, he would be encouraged to hear that they were going to be successful in taking out the army. So here in verse 15, when Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he bowed down and worshipped. He returned to the camp of Israel and called out, "Get up! The Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands." And Gideon is ready. So Gideon, at this point, he's aligned to his will with God. And it's such a great image because a lot of times we're always off the mark, aren't we? But we're going to see what happens when you line up, just how on point we can be with God. So, verse 16 and 17, it's going to get a little weird here. Dividing the 300 men into 3 companies, he placed trumpets, empty jars in the hands of all of them, with torches inside. "Watch me," he told them. "Follow my lead. When I get to the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do." Now, things are just getting weirder. I mean, we started off right, 32,000 Israelites, not too bad. God's like, no, we're not doing that. We'll get rid of like 22,000 of those guys. Now we got 10,000. Okay, it's a little tougher. He's like, nah, still too many. Let's do 300. And now they've separated 300 men into 3 companies of 100. I don't understand this. I don't know what's going on here, but and what are they armed with? I'm sure they have their swords, but Gideon's telling them, I got them up here. This is what they have. They have a torch, they have some type of jar, and they've got a horn. And he's like, this is what we're leading with here, not the sword. We're leading this stuff. Notice too that the torches are in their jars. So I was wondering this whole time, I only realized it last night. I was like, how are they going to light their torches? Like, what if they can't all get it started at the same time? It wouldn't look right. Or if they're lit already, you're telegraphing that you're coming. No, part of the reason for the jar is they were hiding the light so that they could sneak up on them. And it's really smart. And then when they're all done, they're going to break them, make all this noise. So I guess God had a plan for that. So, yeah, God does some strange and mysterious things. But Gideon, again, he doesn't question God. He's aligned with him. He's like, this is what's going to happen, and it's going to work. He's acting out his will. So, and this is with Gideon knowing, his faith at this moment. He's seen his army size reduce. He's had to ask for all these signs, because he's just unsure. This is not Gideon now. So, let's see what the plan is here in verse 18. It says, when I and all who are with me blow our trumpets, then from all around the camp blow yours and shout, for the Lord and for Gideon. See, Gideon's trying to scare the Midianites by appearing larger than they really are. See, they're down in this valley. They were up here on this mountain. These guys, I think they thought they were south at one point. This is going to scare the pants right off them. And when we say surrounded, I say lightly. Again, this is 300 people surrounding 135,000. But it's not going to look like that. So here in verse 19, so Gideon and 100 men with him reached the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch. Just after they had changed the guard, they blew their trumpets and broke the jars that were in their hands. So before they were above, and I've seen some depictions of like what they thought Gideon surrounding this army might have been like when they were charging, and a lot of them, they have them up on the hill still. No, they got right up to the boundaries of this camp. And we're going to see here, this is super important, just how much chaos is going to be caused by this. So yeah, sneaky. Verse 20 and 21, the three companies blew the trumpets and smashed the jars, grasping the torches in their left hands and holding in their right hands the trumpets they were to blow. They shouted, a sword for the Lord and for Gideon, while each man held his position around the camp. All the Midianites ran, crying as they fled. If you could, just for a moment here, if you guys don't mind, close your eyes for a second. Imagine you're in a tent. You're a part of an army that's 135,000 men. You think that you're fairly safe at the moment. You're just getting ready. Maybe tomorrow you're going to fight. Maybe you're tired. You're going to get some good rest. Maybe you ate and you're feeling full. Then out of nowhere, these horns start blowing like crazy. It sounds like they're all around you. You don't know what's going on. You run out of your tent and you look, and there are torches lit all around the camp. And there's men shouting, a sword for the Lord and for Gideon. And you think that you are surrounded by 32,000 Israelites, because I'll bet you that is the last information that they had. They are scared poopless. I'm just saying, this is not what you want to hear at this moment for these guys. And I think it's interesting too, the Israelites are staying put. They're not rushing in. That's not what they were told to do. We're going to find out why here in a moment. In verse 22, so when the 300 trumpets sounded, the Lord caused the men throughout the camp to turn on each other with their swords. The army fled to Beth Shittah towards Zererah, as far as the border of Abel Meholah near to Beth. Notice the words, the Lord caused the men. The Israelites really didn't do much in this battle. They blew some horns. They had to light their torches. They yelled a bunch. They smashed some pottery. God is the one who used these actions. They were more like a catalyst, And God capitalized on that. He made them attack each other right before the eyes of the Israelites so they all could see the Lord working in that moment. Amen. Anybody want to guess maybe how many soldiers might have perished at this moment? How many fled? We're going to find out here in a little bit. There's still some more things happening, but I think this final message here, I think Gideon has three main points we really need to brush on. The first one here is that faith in God is always well placed. Gideon and his 300 men displayed their faith in God's deliverance. From the moment Gideon was called until the army of Midian turned on itself, Gideon was having to put his trust in God this whole time. His promise, and God delivered. And our work with God involves moving parts on both sides. God's moving, we need to be working too. Now, the army that was here, they're fled now. They are gone. They're freaked out. All their people were killing each other. There was blaring horns and torches, and they are out of here. They're running. In verse 23 to 24, Israelites from Naphtali, Asher, and all Manasseh were called out, and they pursued the Midianites. Gideon sent messengers throughout the hill country of Ephraim, saying, "Come down against the Midianites and seize the waters of the Jordan ahead of them, as far as Beth-barah." So all the men of Ephraim were called out, and they seized the waters of the Jordan as far as Beth-barah. So likely, remember, we were sending all these people home. Well, they got a job to do now. They got this retreating army, and now it's time to mop up and clean up. God did the hard part. He reduced these numbers down drastically. And now it's time for Israel to move. Now, these Ephraimites, we're going to find out, they're a pretty proud people. They cause some trouble here and there, and they can be quite arrogant at a few points. There's a part here in Judges, I don't quite remember where, but they start a civil war with another judge later on. I mean, these guys mean business, and we're going to see here in verse 25. They also captured two of the Midianite leaders, Oreb and Zeb. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and Zeb at the winepress of Zeb. They pursued the Midianites and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon, who was by the Jordan. See, bit by bit, God's plan is coming to fruition. We're just cutting away at these oppressors that have been attacking these guys for 7 long years. God's faithfulness is just being provided over and over again. And who's at the head of this? Gideon. Not this fearful thresher. No. He took that jacket off and he put on a new one. This mighty warrior. And in some translations, mighty man of valor. That's who's leading this army right now. Now, there's always going to be bumps on the road. There's going to be things in the way, stumbling blocks, people that tend to make things harder. And we're going to see right here what Gideon had to deal with. Remember those Ephraimites we were talking about? They get a little upset at Gideon. What? Why? Well, here in verse 1. See, now the Ephraimites asked Gideon, "Why have you treated us like this? Why didn't you call us when you went to fight Midian?" And they challenged him vigorously. Everybody should be celebrating right now. Again, 7 years under oppression, and they're getting business taken care of, and these guys are just complaining. Well, why weren't we part of all the fun? Trouble does not take a holiday, does it? You think everything's going well, and then something else has to happen. But Gideon's on top of it, though. Here in verses 2 and 3. See, but he answered them, "What have I accomplished compared to you? Aren't the gleanings of Ephraim's grapes better than the full grape harvest of Abiezer? God gave Oreb and Zeb, the Midianite leaders, into your hands. What was I able to do compared to you?" At this, the resentment against him subsided. Some people might think that maybe Gideon's copping out here a little bit, that maybe he's trying to placate them so that he doesn't get hurt. I don't believe this is what's happening. Gideon is a leader right now, and I think he's just offering perspective to these guys. They're being feisty, and he's just trying to calm them down. he's not diminishing God's role here at all. He said, hey, God gave you these people and you took care of it. Like, what was I doing? We were just chasing guys. He's trying to give them perspective here. Like, these were the leaders and you did something amazing. So, once this is extinguished, they had some more work to do. So, verses 4 to 6, Gideon and his 300 men, exhausted, yet keeping up the pursuit, came to the Jordan and crossed it. And he said to the men of Succoth, give my troops some bread. They are worn out, and I am still pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. But the officials of Succoth said, do you already have the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna in your possession? Why should we give bread to your troops? I guess there's still people just not quite with the program. They're still scared. Now maybe they're farther away, so they didn't see a lot of this stuff, but what they should have been seeing is an army, which I haven't said how big they are yet, running away from an army of 300. Like, these guys should be inspired, like, hey, we're getting stuff done. Yeah, let's help out too. But they don't. They're scared. They're being little scaredy cats. And Gideon has some choice words for them. In verse 7, and Gideon replied, just for that, when the Lord has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, I will tear your flesh with desert thorns and briars. Well, and it doesn't end there. There's another place with the same problem. In verse 8, from there he went up to Peniel, some places call it Penuel, and made the same request of them. But they answered as the men of Succoth had. See, two places that should be supporting their people. God's on their side here, and they refuse out of fear. They're just stuck as they were before. Remember in the beginning where we found the Israelites? They were hiding in caves, mountain clefts, strongholds. That's Peniel here. They have this stronghold that I think they just feel nice and comfy in, and they're like, why do we need to make waves? They're just this fearful people, and they don't want to draw attention to themselves. And again, here in verse 9, Gideon has some choice words. So he said to the men of Peniel, when I return in triumph, I will tear down this tower. These punishments seem harsh. I mean, you're going to punish one with briars and thorns. You're going to tear down a tower and another one. But if we think about it, what was the punishment for the Israelites when they were turning against God, when they were ignoring him? He brought in these people, and they were disciplined. They were oppressed because they just weren't getting with the program. So these were the promises that Gideon made to them, and we're going to have to get back to them a little bit later. But after all this, I think the next kind of point we need to realize here is that faith requires endurance. See, the road can be long. These guys are exhausted. They're tired, they're wore out. We can get the same way, going through life, and we just get exhausted. We get tired, we get wore out. We just think, I don't know. I'm just going to sit for a while and just, no. And sometimes we don't get any help at all. But even though God is with us, it doesn't mean that the hard times don't stop. See, their endurance, we see it. When the army is being reduced, they're still moving forward. When they're scared, they're still moving forward. When they're doing weird things that don't involve a sword, and they're just standing around this camp, like playing chicken with them, they're enduring because there's a plan. When the armies are running, they're chasing after them. When these people are not helping them out, they're still moving forward. We need to do that as well. I mean, think about it, 450 to 1 odds, hostile army, reluctant allies, and they stay the course. Paul writes here in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 58, it says, therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. Amen. Now, again, we're going to have to come back to these guys. The pursuit's still on. We got some jobs to do. In verse 10, It says, Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor with a force of about 15,000 men. All that were left of the armies of the eastern peoples, 120,000 swordmen had fallen. We started out with 135,000, and they're down to 15. So between the night where God caused the army to attack each other, and then the people who had left the army initially coming in and cleaning up some people, and the Ephraimites taking out the Midianite leaders, 120,000 gone. You got 15,000 people running across Israel, going across the Jordan, running back to their territory, scared, being chased by 300 people. That's what's happening right now. Talk about impossible. And God made it happen. There's a map up here, just to kind of give you a little bit of perspective. It's really kind of tough. Right at the very top there, you're going to see, that's the Sea of Galilee, the very bottom of it. So this is, for perspective, why that's where they are. And towards kind of the left there, where there's a red circle, that's roughly where they think the battle happened. And this army, Gideon and his men, had to go all the way down the coast to Beth Barah. Then they had to go up and cross the Jordan, past Succoth, past Peniel, until they go to Karkor. Estimated roughly 100 to 150 miles that these guys are having to run through. And let me tell you, there's no Highway 101. There's no speedboats, there's no motor cars, there's no planes, there's no taxi. These guys are having to run through hard country. There might be some dirt roads here and there. But they are exhausted and tired. They haven't eaten. And they're going against an army of 15,000 still. 50 to 1 odds roughly. And God is still going to deliver them into their hands. So the chase ends, and we're here at verse 11 through 12 in verse 8 in chapter 8. So Gideon went up by the route of the nomads east of Nabah and Jogbehah and attacked the unsuspecting army. Zebah and Zalmunna, the two kings of Midian, fled, but he pursued them and captured them, routing their entire army. They did what Succoth and Peniel thought they couldn't do. They captured the two Midianite kings. And I like the word that's used here, the unsuspecting army, the unsuspecting part. See, the Hebrew word for that is betach, meaning security or safety. These guys thought they were secure. Why? They were running away. They're in their own lands now. They had no idea that 300 crazy Israelites were going to be chasing them all the way to their area. They dropped their guard. They thought they were safe and secure. And then here comes Gideon and his men. So with how far Gideon went and how exhausted they are, none of them died. They keep saying 300 men, 300 men, 300 men, all throughout the time. God kept these men alive, strengthened, giving them their boost of energy, just to keep them. It reminds me of when the Israelites were in the desert, going through, and God was sustaining them during that time. He had to have been. I'm surprising that they all just didn't die out. And here too, to be able to chase down all this army and annihilate them totally, God had to have been giving them everything that they needed. So the main task is done. All of them are killed except for the two Midianite kings. And so now they got to go back the way they came. And here in verse 13 and 14, Gideon, son of Joash, then returned from the battle by the pass of Herez. He caught a young man of Succoth and questioned him, and the young man wrote down for him the names of the 77 officials of Succoth, the elders of the town. See, Gideon is going to be true to his word. These two towns turned their backs on God, on their people, their fellow people, and they were thinking of themselves. And Gideon needed to know who to actually punish for these actions. So in verse 15, then Gideon came and said to the men of Succoth, "Here are Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you taunted me, saying, do you already have the hands of Ziba and Zalmunna in your possession? Why should we give bread to your exhausted men? So Succoth seems to be the first on the chopping block here. And it doesn't seem like he kills these people. And we're going to see here in the next verse, their punishment is very harsh. It doesn't say that they die, though. So in verse 16, he took the elders of the town and taught the men of Succoth a lesson by punishing them with desert thorns and briars. See, they wear the consequences of their actions on them. It's a picture we should be kind of familiar with. See, Jesus wore a crown of thorns upon his head for a different reason. And it symbolized something totally different. Obviously, with him, they were saying that he was the king of the Jews, and so they made this crown of thorns and put it on his head. But when we think of Jesus up on the cross, stretched out like this, the crown of thorns on his head, bearing our sins, our punishment that he took on, those crown of thorns are a part of that. The difference is that Jesus didn't deserve it. He took that on himself for us. These people have to bear their own punishment in this moment. And in verse 17, he also pulled down the tower of Peniel and killed the men of the town. Why these men were killed, and not the others from the other town, I don't know. I believe that the tower being torn down was a message or a symbol that when you think you're safe and you're choosing to not rely on the Lord, they tear that down because they just didn't get the message. So all that's left to handle now are these two Midianite kings. So verse 18 to 19. Then he asked Ziba and Zalmunna, what kind of men did you kill at Tabor? Men like you, they answered, each one with the bearing of a prince. Gideon replied, those were my brothers, the sons of my own mother. As surely as the Lord lives, if you had spared their lives, I would not kill you. The first note I get off of this is that these two kings recognizing Gideon, this type of person that he is now, he has this bearing of a prince. This is not the same threshing winepress guy that we met at the beginning. He carries himself differently. And regardless of whether or not he would have let them live or not, God said that all of these people were going to be wiped out. That was what he said to do. But it got personal for Gideon now. So we see in verse 20, turning to Jether, his oldest son, he said, kill them. But Jether did not draw his sword because he was only a boy and he was afraid. He was going to have his son kill these kings. It likely would have been very painful and slow and kind of like rubbing salt in the wound, embarrassing to be killed by some kid after having been defeated by an army of 300. But here in verse 21, Ziba and Zalmunna said, come, do it yourself. As is the man, so is his strength. So Gideon stepped forward and killed them and took the ornaments off their camels' necks. And just like that, we have total victory. God was faithful. He delivered his people from the Midianites. The ornaments, spoils of war, that's just going to happen. You know, they're going to be lying around. They take stuff. And the Israelites move forward in an interesting way here. They're like right away, things start to get a little hairy. In verse 22, the Israelites said to Gideon, rule over us, you, your son, your grandson, because you have saved us from the hand of Midian. Now, you can think of it that this is kind of an honor, you know? I mean, this guy who was this weak clan member, who was not very much of anything, he's now asking to be king of the Israelites. But really, if you think about it, the Israelites take their eyes off of God here for a moment and go right to Gideon. And it's just starting right off the bat. But you see, Gideon has his wits about him. He does. Here in verse 23, Gideon told them, I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. It all comes back to the same thing. God should be the focal point. our eyes, our actions, our everything should just be on God. That is a lot of power to turn down, to be king. I don't know if maybe when you're little or maybe yesterday, thinking, what would it be like if I were king? And some of us, maybe that would get to our heads. But Gideon, he does good here. He points back to God. Little bump in the road, though. A little stumbling block that maybe Gideon doesn't realize quite right away. See in verse 24 to 26. And he said, I do have one request, that each of you give me an earring from your share of the plunder. It was a custom of the Ishmaelites to wear gold earrings, the enemy. So they answered, we'll be glad to give them. So they spread out a garment, and each of them threw in a ring from his plunder into it. And the weight of the gold rings he asked for came to 1,700 shekels, not counting the ornaments, the pendants, and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, or the chains that were on the camels' necks. We're roughly talking about 42.8 troy ounces when we're talking about gold. That's kind of how they talk about it. It's an insane amount of gold. We're talking like $1.9 million in today's money. That is quite the haul for Gideon. So he doesn't want to be king. He wants God to have all the glory, but he does want the spoils. Now, seeking a reward for a conquest like this, it's not necessarily the problem. See here in, verse 27. Gideon made the gold into an ephod, which he placed in Ophrah, his town. All Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. So I have a picture of maybe what the ephod might have looked like. An ephod really is a ceremonial garment. Aaron wore it, the priests of the temple would wear it for a few different things. It's supposed to be a holy thing. It's possible, maybe it started out that Gideon was trying to replicate something like that for good intentions. Possibly, maybe thinking that this would represent the victory and it would be like a reminder. But it doesn't turn into that. It actually starts to pull people away from God and focus more on their own actions and focusing on an object instead of God himself. Good intentions or not, the moment this happened, they should have stopped that. But we continue. Thus Midian was subdued, verse 28 to 32, before the Israelites and did not raise its head again. During Gideon's lifetime, the land had peace for 40 years. Jerubbaal, son of Joash, went back home to live. He had 70 sons of his own. He had many wives. His concubine, who lived in Shechem, also bore him a son, whom he named Abimelech. Gideon, son of Joash, died at a good old age and was buried in the tomb of his father Joash in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. Despite the issue of the ephod, despite falling into this pit of sexual immorality, Gideon made sure that while he was alive, that people were not turning back to Baal and the Asherah. There was peace for 40 years, so there was that. Obviously, that's a lot of wives to have. That's not okay, and apparently those weren't enough, and so he had a concubine on top of that. I don't know. But we know that there's really only one person on earth who was perfect, and that was Jesus Christ. See, Gideon is just a man, one picked from a winepress in fear, led to deliver God's people, and he did his best. And despite failings later in life, he was faithful to the Lord. The Gideons, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, they chose their name, Gideon, not because, later on in life he kind of messed up and had some family drama. That's not why they chose him. They chose him because of what Gideon embodies, this idea of being faithful to God, having so few, aligning their will with God. I point this out to show that even when we meet our goals, we need to keep moving forward and not be complacent. Being stagnant, resting on our laurels can invite complacency and Hello. Oh, there we go. We invite other things in that shouldn't be there. And it leads to my third point. We should be mindful. Batteries there. Accomplish our goals. I think